just to know you.
The lesson studies heading is the rhythms of rest. And I was quite intrigued by this, the rhythms of rest. And as I was contemplating on how to present this, and remember, it's not my format to follow chronologically from Sabbath to Friday. You should have done that at home. We are going to discuss it together here in the lesson study. But when you think of the heading, Rhythms of Rest, I think what comes up in one's mind is the value of rhythms. And when I looked at this, I was wondering, what's the author going to speak about? And it was surprisingly mostly about the Sabbath. Very important. I'm going to be introducing and looking at that. But I was just thinking, one of the things that you have in your body that has a rhythm all the time, and that rhythm gives a lot of information away, and that is your heartbeat. If I want to assess if a person is healthy, I will listen to their heartbeat. I will attempt to find out what their resting pulse is. I will look at their age, calculate should that be a good resting pulse for a kind of person in that age, etc. Your heart has a rhythm, beating all the time. If something happens to the rhythm of that heartbeat, and let's say you have a heart attack, something's wrong with you immediately. You could die from it, or you will need specialized treatment. And what I recognize is that when I look at the universe, and I'm going to be bringing this out in the lesson study, there is a heartbeat, a rhythm throughout the universe. But sadly, the rhythm of Earth got out of sync with the rhythm of the universe. When Adam and Eve chose to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that day, this rhythm of this world became out of sync with the rest of the universe. And yet there is something that God did that is so incredible to help us to somehow, even in our fallen world, find ourselves still in some sense synchronized with the rest of the universe. Now, I'm going to introduce some thoughts that I think is going to intrigue you, but I want to start off by taking you to the memory text, which is found in Genesis chapter 2, verse 3. And most of you should know Genesis 2, particularly verse 3, out of your heads, because it has reference to what we, as one of our pillars of faith, is all about. And it says there, verse 3, and I'm reading out of the New International, "Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." Now it's interesting, certain things come out of there that I am drawn to. And I want to read it again to you. I want to read this verse again. It says, "Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." Now the word "had" there tells me past tense. Isn't that true? And yet, I have a question. Was the Sabbath part of the acts of creation? In our world, when we consider that the Sabbath is given to us there, was it part of the acts of creation? Because if I understand it correctly, Genesis chapter 1, the very last verse, verse 31 says, God saw all that he had made, so again past tense, and it was very good. and there was evening, and there was morning, and then it says the sixth day. So if I understand this correctly, the creative work of God actually ended on the Friday, if I can use that more literally. And yet somehow we introduce, and the author hinted towards it, which I wasn't favorable towards, was that then God created the seventh day. But then he wasn't complete with creation. If the sixth day was the final day of his acts of creation, then it shouldn't have said it was very good and it was evening, morning, and sixth day. It should have then said, and the next day God created the Sabbath. That should be what the wording should be there. So what I want to bring out immediately from the beginning is that the seventh day isn't a created day, but it is a day. But this day of seventh day existed long before our world existed. And on what grounds can I say that? When we look at what we've been studying, and we had to look at Exodus chapter 20, and then we had to look at Deuteronomy chapter 5, which was always pointing towards it. It says, remember the Sabbath day in the one, and then the other one, observe the Sabbath day. And we have this variation of words that are used there. But it doesn't say that remember the Sabbath day because God created it. It says remember the Sabbath day because in 6 days... It doesn't say 7 days. In 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth. So what's the Sabbath's role? Now, the interesting thing, that the Sabbath is introduced in Exodus 20 and in Deuteronomy 5 as part of the 10 Commandments. And yet, if we understand it properly, the 10 Commandments weren't only... It was the first time in Exodus 20 and in Deuteronomy 5 that we have a written record of the law. But prior to that, the law existed. And how do I know that? Because I read right here in Genesis chapter 2 of God resting on the Sabbath day. I read that. So it wasn't something that was introduced only at Mount Sinai. The Sabbath rest isn't something that was there. And the interesting thing, that one of the things that the author did, which was brilliant, he drew our attention to Exodus chapter 16. Now, if I had to ask you, and you have to be very clever to be able to answer this, what number comes first, 16 or 20? Which number comes first? 16. Now you might wonder, what's that got to do with 20? Well, 20 is when we get the 10 Commandments. Exodus 20 is all about when the 10 Commandments are given. And yet in Exodus 16, we have a whole time period. And it's a period that doesn't just start for 7 days. It's a period of 40 years where God introduces the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was already there before the 10 Commandments were given. Isn't that correct? That's a conclusion. God started with the manna before he gave the 10 Commandments. And the purpose of the manna giving, there's a lot of reasons why, but was to introduce a cycle, a rhythm. You see, while they were in Egypt, they lost the rhythm. While they were in Egypt, the Sabbath became something that wasn't kept and honored and, looked at. It made me think of a conversation that we were having on our way here, where my wife's mother needs to be reminded regarding birthdays. And it's not because she doesn't care, but because simply she has no need to look at the calendar. So I wonder sometimes when she gets up if she knows it's Friday. Or if she gets up and she knows it's Tuesday. Or is it just another day? Is there some way in which, and I find that sometimes, and especially with what has happened with COVID and all of that, and not being able to attend church, people kind of fell out of rhythm. And one of the most important things is to get people back into rhythm, to get them back into patterns. And so God took this one most important thing, and for 40 years he introduces the pattern. How does he introduce it? Every day you could go and get a portion of the food that fell. If you didn't go out early in the morning and you went out by lunchtime, the sad news, it would have melted away by then, and you did not get any food for that day. But if you had gone out and you got the food and you had made it, that food lasted for at least a year, didn't it? Now, what did you discover when you read Exodus 16? That if any food went over to the next day and you decided to go and open up your fridge and take out the food, what did you find? It was full of maggots. It was full of worms. It was not edible. So unless you ate it that day, you're not going to eat it the next day. So what did you have to do the next day? You had to go out again. So what was God doing? He's forcing you into a rhythm. You have to go out the next day and get some more food. And that happened for 6 days. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. You could never take the food and put it over into the next day. But all of a sudden, on the 6th day, which was known later on as preparation. Now, I love the word preparation, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more. The 6th day became the day of preparation. And I don't know how many of you have WhatsApp, but if you do have WhatsApp, how many people send you a message, hope you have a wonderful preparation day? What are you preparing for? For Sabbath. Now, the interesting thing, the word Sabbath, as we've already discovered, means rest. So you preparing to rest. I mean, isn't that incredible? I mean, that's a gift to us. I mean, this world desperately needs to rest. I have discovered that when you are sick, the best medicine for sickness is to rest. And God recognizes that our world, which is extremely sick, needs to rest. Now, but I'm going to expand on this as we go on, because as I looked at the lesson, we have God introducing a rhythm. And on the 6th day, which is preparation day, you go out, but this time you don't only collect food for the day. You're actually going to collect food for the rest day. So that in the rest day, you don't have to go out and collect food. And you'll see why I'm emphasizing this as we go on. But the interesting thing, on the 6th day, you went out, collect double portion, put it in, and any food that was left over when it came to the rest day was edible. You could eat it. But what happened at the end of the rest day? What happened to the food if you wanted to carry it over into the first day? It again would become maggots. You see, what I'm trying to show you here is that God was already introducing something, showing, first of all, 2 things. That He is the creator, but He is also the sustainer of His creation. He has never stopped looking after you. He has never stopped looking after this world. So we see here that God introduces in this Exodus 16, He brings a people back to a rhythm. Because while in Egypt, they had fallen out of sync. They forgot who God was. They forgot, because do you remember when Moses asked God, I'm going to go back to the people, but what must I say? What is your name? And then God says to him, you need to call me I am that I am, and tell them that I am, and then he says this, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. And the name that you are to remember me by is throughout generations, I am. Now that's amazing, because somehow God had to reintroduce himself first again back to the Israelites, who were his people. Because he actually says to Pharaoh, let my people go. But the people did not know God. They confused the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the gods of the Egyptians. So I want you to see something, and I want you to understand that part of the Sabbath celebration is really falling back into a rhythm. But it's not just a worldly rhythm. In actual fact, we, by keeping the Sabbath on the seventh day, are actually doing what the rest of the universe is already doing. Every seventh day, according to the Word of God, I am counseled that the universe celebrates the Sabbath. Now, I'm coming back again to asking this question. Was the seventh day a created day, or were we just made aware of it? You see, because I want you to understand, on which day was Adam and Eve created? Without a doubt, on the sixth day. Isn't that true? Without a doubt, on the sixth day. So what was the next event? Here they are created. They don't even know what day it is. I want you to understand that they weren't created on the first day. And so they didn't hear God saying it was evening and morning the first day, and it was evening and morning the second day. They didn't see any of that. But all of a sudden they hear and we read. But remember, this is record made for us. But God didn't say, well, it's evening and morning and it's the sixth day after creating Adam and Eve. It was just a day that he had created them. But the next thing that first of all, I'm kind of thinking to myself, did Adam have consciousness before his creation? So all of a sudden he's created. He doesn't even know he's created because he didn't have any conscience about being created. So there he is, looking around. Does he know what day it is? If he had consciousness before, then he would know what day it is. But he didn't have consciousness before, so he doesn't know what day it is. Here it is, and God speaks to him. He puts him in the garden and all of that. And then he's looking and he's getting to meet this God. But he doesn't see God creating, because creation's finished, because that's what the sixth day happened. So now he's looking at God, and here God is, and he notices that God's resting. That's the first thing that Adam and Eve take note of. Because that's what we read happened on the seventh day. So straight after the sixth day, the next thing that God did, I want you to understand, not Adam and Eve, the next thing that God did, as we read there, verse 2, by the seventh day, listen to this, by the seventh day, that means before the seventh day, by the seventh day, God had finished, didn't say was still busy, had finished the work he had been doing. And then it says, but now it tells me something. It doesn't tell me that he creates, but it tells me something he does. It says, then, so on the seventh day, he rested from all the work. So we are introduced not to a creative act of God, but we are introduced to God doing something. And what he does, he rests. Now, I'm intrigued by this. Adam and Eve is observing. Look at what God's doing. He's resting. And then we read, and he's not talking. I want you to notice, listen to me. He's not talking to Adam and Eve at this moment. Is he talking to them? Is he saying to them, hey, I want you to listen now. I am busy wanting you to understand you must do this. No, they are watching him. They are observing him. Because everything we read there is about what God's doing. He rests, and then it says, verse 3, then God blessed. So we see God doing something. Wow, that's interesting. Is he creating or is he doing something about this day? He's making this day unique. He's making it unique not because he's creating it, but he's making it unique because of things that he's doing. He's resting, he's blessing, as it says there, and then he makes it holy. 3 things that God does on that day, that God does after creation. I want you to listen because I'm choosing my words very carefully here. 6 days he creates. What do we know that God does on the 7th day? He rests. That's what it says. And we are observant to this. Now, did God need rest? No. So our understanding of rest is we need to figure this out. Adam and Eve need rest. Why? And I want you to recognize certain things are happening here. What God is doing with our world that was just created, there were other worlds. They were already in sync with one another. They already on the same day got together and worshipped God. Because you see, it wasn't something that only planet Earth does. It was something that the universe does, especially if the 10 Commandments is God's commandment. Now, God is not only the king of this world or the creator of this world, because then the commandment will only be bound to our world. But God is the creator of the universe, because that's what the Sabbath teaches me. For in 6 days God made heaven and earth. So it tells me that God, when he created the rest of the universe, he created it in the similar pattern to what he created ours. He created, as he created, he will create for 6 days. But what will you find him doing on a 7th day? What will be his pattern? He'll be resting. You know, one of the most interesting verses in the New Testament to me about Jesus, who was God in human form, the word says, as it was his custom, he kept the Sabbath. As it was what? His custom. Now, was it his custom because he was a Jew? Or was it his custom because that's what God does? You hear what I'm asking you? God keeps the Sabbath. And because I don't see Adam and Eve keeping the Sabbath there, I see God keeping the Sabbath. But he does something. He says to Adam and Eve, through this whole experience, he's saying something to them. I'm doing this because by doing this, I'm putting you in rhythm with the rest of the universe. And so, in some sense, our world was in harmony with the rest of the universe because of this very act of God. And you'll see where I'm taking you. The Sabbath is crucial in helping us to be part of the universe. The keeping of the Sabbath, actually, in a small way, by you doing that on Sabbath, you are actually doing what the rest of the universe does on Sabbath. So this is not just a planet thing, and it's not just a Seventh-day Adventist thing. It is the rest of the universe creation thing that they keep the Sabbath. And God, every Sabbath, keeps it. He doesn't work on the Sabbath. He rests. That's what it says. And I want you to see something about this that's so dynamic, and I'm hoping that by the end of our lesson study, that you will see the Sabbath in a way that is much more precious than you can ever imagine. The important thing that we need to recognize is that we are observing God doing something, not Adam and Eve. And yet, what have we made the Sabbath all about? It separates us from them. We are different and all that. No, dear friends, you, in actual fact, by keeping the Sabbath, are in harmony with God. You're not in harmony with people around you. Unless they are in harmony with God, you are basically out of sync. But then it says, He is Lord of the Sabbath. Now I'm glad I appreciate your input on this. You see, what I wanted you to see and recognize about the Sabbath, it's got nothing, we're involved in it, but it's really not about us. Now, in the Ten Commandments, you find the Sabbath truth. But the Sabbath, interestingly, which is unique to the others, all the others is about don't do this, don't do that, don't have other gods before me, don't steal, don't murder. But the Sabbath doesn't say don't. The Sabbath actually says remember or actually do. The Sabbath or the Ten Commandments is God's Ten Commandments. Isn't that true? So when did the Ten Commandments already exist? From forever. From the beginning. The Ten Commandments were there. Do you understand? So thank you for bringing it out. But we as a world, although it pre-existed, we as a world had just been created. And we need to now be informed about the rest of the universe's creed of law. In actual fact, the Bible teaches us very clearly that man was made under law. Now, not only is our world created under law, but so is the rest of the universe created. How do I know that the rest of the universe is created under law? Especially God's law. Because God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God said, let there be suns and moons and stars. And let the sun give its light in the day. And let the moon, we have all those things listening to God. That's what it means to be under God's rule. But what I want you to sense, so thank you for that. Although when we read the word, and that's the problem, because we tend to read into this, first of all, from a self point of view. We tend to look at it, and the word that we will use is subjectively. We are the reason why there is a Sabbath. Or we are the reason why you don't kill and don't steal. No. You were just introduced. Now, this is the most amazing thing. Did God ask you to do something that He wasn't doing? You see, the crazy part is that the rest of the universe is doing what God does. And Jesus kept the Sabbath as it was His custom, and all He's asking creation to do is to do what He does. Because why must you do what He does? Because you were created in His image. But you'll see why I'm taking you here. You see, one of the most important things that we've got to teach people about the Sabbath is that the Sabbath is truly that signet or that sign that you actually belong to the universe. Do you hear me? When you are out of sync, then there's something wrong. Now, and I'm going to explain this as we go on more, because the Sabbath is introduced, first of all, to us as the means by which we are to remember the Creator God. That He is the owner of the universe and that He made everything. Do you understand? When did the variation that we find in Deuteronomy 5 actually come into effect regarding the Sabbath? Now remember, in Exodus 20, we are introduced, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, 6 days shall the labor and do all thy work, and then it tells you about all the animals and all your people, and all the people under your ruling, they are to keep the Sabbath and not to break. And then it says, why must we keep? Well, let's go and look at that. Go with me to Exodus, and I want you to look at Exodus chapter 20, and I want you to, I'm sure you've noticed this difference already, but I want you to look that in Exodus chapter 20, when we look at the fourth commandment, we are introduced to the reason for keeping it. And I want you to look from verse 8, it tells you all of that. But then it says in verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now what do you find in Exodus 20 that is common to Genesis chapter 2? That exact phrase. Just keep your finger there, because maybe you didn't pick up on that. But if you go back with me to Genesis chapter 2, and you look there, it says, then God blessed the seventh day. Well, let me start with verse 2. By the seventh day, God had finished all the work he had been doing. So that on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Reading again there, verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and earth and the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day, which is the part of verse 2, and then verse 3 of Genesis there. It says there, and then, therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. We almost got the link of 2 and 3 brought out here in Exodus 20. But in Exodus 20, we are to be reminded that God is creator of not only our world, but the universe. Are you with me? That's the value of the Sabbath in Exodus 20. But now go to Deuteronomy chapter 5. And I want you to notice that in Deuteronomy chapter 5, you had to read from verse 12, and that's where the word is not remember the Sabbath day, but observe. It's very interesting that there's a change in emphasis from remembering to actually keeping. The one you remember that God created, and I believe that the reason why the world feels or says that we come from evolution is because we don't remember. But part of the work of the Sabbath is to remind you that you were created. Okay, but now in Deuteronomy chapter 5, we see there the word in verse 12. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. And I like this because part of this is also Isaiah 58, which you had to read. But observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. How do I keep it holy? We're going to talk about that just now. But the value here is observe. That means you are called to do something. In Exodus, you were called to remember what God did. He rested, he had created, he blessed, and he holied the Sabbath. Do you understand? That's what you are to remember. But now in Deuteronomy chapter 5, it's changing the emphasis. It's moving basically away from what God did, and it's a way in which he's saying, now you do that. You bless the Sabbath, and you make it holy. Because that's what it says. That's what you just read. And the emphasis moves away from the creation of God, because I want you to notice that if you look at the last part of Deuteronomy chapter 5, when we look at the last part of this verse, it says in verse 15, now in Exodus it was, remember that God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, do you know where the emphasis is? To remind you that God is creator. But all of a sudden, there is a movement away from that thought in verse 15 of Deuteronomy chapter 5, where it says, remember. Now we also, the remember in Exodus started in verse 1, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But here all of a sudden, It starts off with observe, but later on it brings out the word remember. But what are you to remember now? That you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Where's the emphasis on creation here? There isn't. But what is the emphasis on now? On salvation. That God is not only the creator. Now, why this change? I love the idea that our first duty regarding the Sabbath is to reintroduce it. That is what we ought to do, because people, as you quite correctly said, don't even know that the Sabbath is really valuable. Don't even know of its meaning and its purpose. So by reintroducing the Sabbath, we tend to emphasize the fact that God is creator and all of that, which is correct, because that's what the duty of the Sabbath was in the beginning. And it still serves that purpose. But the second phase of it now is we need to, and I'm going to say this to you now, you are all Sabbath keepers sitting here. You've remembered the Sabbath day because you're sitting here. Do you understand? But now my counsel to you is observe it.
But how do you?
That's all of what's coming out of here now. You see, initially when God created, can you create like God? No, you must just remember that God created. What are you to remember from Deuteronomy chapter 5? You see, the interesting thing, you all sitting here were once deluded. You all were misinformed once upon a time and didn't know about the Sabbath, and you didn't know about God being the creator. But you've been brought that information has been introduced to you, and you grabbed it with both hands. Wow! And you're keeping the Sabbath because that is telling you that you are telling to the world that you know who the creator God is. You see, that's what you do when you keep the Sabbath. When people ask you why you keep the Sabbath, you say, because I know who the creator God is. But dear friends, what the world needs just as powerfully as to know that God is the creator, they need to know that he's also their savior. Did you hear me? And that same power that God used to create is the same power he's using to save you. That same Jesus whom everything was created through is the same Jesus who came to this world to save it. And only somebody equal with the power of God to be able to create is the only God who can really save you from sin. Do you understand? The miracle of creation, which we cannot understand how God spoke, is still the same miracle of salvation. How he actually takes your stony heart and gives you a heart of flesh. How he actually successfully writes on your heart the 10 Commandments. I mean, that is powerful, that God can actually take a sinner and make him holy. That's what the Sabbath introduces. Now I want to remind you that God isn't only your creator, but he's still, and he will always remain your creator, but he is now, as a result of sin, also your savior. Which we forget. Because somehow in the Sabbath we start feeling that by observing the Sabbath and keeping the commandments, we all of a sudden are saving ourselves through the observance of the law. But we are in actual fact being saved by the blood of the Lamb. Which you must never forget. And the danger is, I'll give you a chance at that. And the danger is, when you start becoming holy, because that's the work that God does on you, you start thinking yourself better than somebody else. And we as a church tend to look at that. We look at other people outside, we're better than they are because they don't know what we know. And shame, they better get to learn to know what we know. And we have this almost holier than thou attitude. But I can assure you, bring that person in to your church and teach them like you've been taught. And guess what? They're going to look at those people afterwards. Oh, they need to come into the church in order to be holy like us. But you see, it's not you that's making yourself holy, because the word teaches me very clearly that a leopard cannot change his spots, and neither can you that's accustomed to doing evil do good. You can't. God has to change you. Do you understand? So, this holiness is a danger. When you start actually being better, which is God's work in you, you need to remember that you were once slaves. You need to remember that God is saving you still. He hasn't stopped saving you. Just as He hasn't stopped creating or sustaining His creation, He still has to sustain you in your salvation. That the Sabbath is not about you. It's about what God is doing. God created. You weren't even there to observe. You only know because He told you. But what you are observing is what is God doing? He's resting. He's blessing. He's keeping holy. But what is God doing since the fall of man? He's saving. See, it's not about you saving. He is saving you. That's what the Sabbath is about. The Sabbath is drawing your attention to what God is doing, not what you're doing. It says there in Deuteronomy chapter 5 that you were once slaves, but God with a mighty hand, did you read that with me? Delivered you. Did you hear? It didn't say he just called. He delivered you with power. And I want to tell you something. The only person that can break the hold that the devil has over you is God. He's the only one that can save you. And the most beautiful thing about it, as you look at it, not only is He the only one that must save you, but He's the only one that is capable of doing it. When you cry out to God for salvation, I got good news for you. If you ask Him to save you, it doesn't say maybe He can, He will. Did you understand? The Sabbath draws my attention to God. But you made a very interesting comment by using Isaiah chapter 58, and I'd like you to go there with me, because that was something. Because there is a change slightly, because in Deuteronomy chapter 5, in Exodus chapter 20, you are told what God does. God blesses, God makes holy, and God rests. That's what you read in Exodus chapter 20. But in Deuteronomy chapter 5, it says that you are to observe the Sabbath by keeping it holy, by blessing it, by resting. So all of a sudden, there is a change of emphasis from what God is doing and is continually doing, but now He's turned it around and He's told you to do something. And basically what He's asking you to do is what He's done. He rested, you rest. He blessed, you bless. He makes holy, you make holy. You're actually imitating God. That's what He's asking you to do. But now the question is, how? What does it mean? But I want you to understand something. You're all called to keep holy. You're all called to bless. And you're all called to rest. Now, how are you doing it? That's the interesting part. How do you know when it's right? Now, so what is right for me, is it right for you? Now, dear friends, if I'm doing something and I'm asking you to do what I do, there's a serious problem. No, I must ask you to do what God's doing. Because He's the one that did it right, isn't it? I might be keeping it holy, but I might be keeping it very not holy. But you think because I'm a Sabbath keeper, I'm keeping it holy, but I'm not. The only person who's keeping it holy, because the word tells me that, is that God in the beginning made it holy. He kept it holy. He blessed it. So, in order for me to know, to answer this question, how do I make it a delight? How do I do that according to Isaiah 58? I'm going to show you this. But we are to observe. So to answer the question of, because I must keep it holy, I must bless it, I must be blessed to me, I'm going to explain that now, etc. But now I do that, and I have to do it by looking at God. But we need to see something. If I want to know how high that wall is, I need a tool. Because you might look at it and say, that looks like 4 meters. Another person might look at it and say, well, I would say 4.5. How do I know what it is?
Measure.
I need a rule. I need a measuring stick. Now, God didn't ask you to figure out what holy is. He didn't ask you to figure out what sanctifying is. He didn't ask you that. He said, I've done it. So he's already set the measuring rule. The Sabbath is not just a particular mold, but it is the mold of God. Did you hear me? It's not the mold of man, it's the mold of God, because he did something. He was the one that kept the Sabbath the first time that we ever saw it. He knows all about it. It's been with him for eternity. If there's anybody who knows how to keep it holy, how to sanctify it, how to bless it, how to rest on it, he's the one. Okay, but listen to what I want to show you. Yes. What's the objective of the Sabbath? To turn our eyes towards God. Isn't that true? Because 6 days you're so busy doing your thing that you're looking at you and everything is happening around you. But on the 7th day, that stops and you're looking at God. Do you understand? I like that. We need to recognize. So part of the observance of the Sabbath is to behold God. And that's what I want us to do. So quickly let's do it because we need to finish. Isaiah chapter 58. It said there, and I want to link to some of the thoughts that have been shared. But we're going to start in verse 13. It says, if you, now notice the emphasis, it's not if God. What's it saying? If you, if you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath. Wow, listen to this. When I use my feet, I'm using my feet to do things, isn't it true? Because my feet get me where I'm going. So if your feet, which is basically your actions or what you ever are doing, is going to be in some way breaking the Sabbath. So you must stop your feet from doing that. Do you understand? You must stop your... It means that in some way, what you're doing in 6 days, you wouldn't do on the Sabbath because... And I have a question. Should you be doing it in the other 6 days?
It depends what it is.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to bring out is breaking the Sabbath. And we tend to say the nursing staff or doctors don't break the Sabbath because they can go and work on it because they work in 6 days anyway. And I did, well, now you can do that. That's something you can do on Sabbath. You can go and help a sick person. No. How do I know what it says here? If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath. And then it says, and from doing as you please on, and then it changes the emphasis, my holy day. So God is all of a sudden saying, hang on, I want you to understand something, that when you keep the Sabbath, it's not yours, it's mine. I want you to remember that. And the way that you're keeping it is telling me how you feel about me. Do you understand? It's like when you give somebody your car to drive, and they smash it or they treat it badly. It tells you how they feel about you. Oh, I'm not going to lend you my car again. You see, from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call, Ingrid, the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find what? Joy in the Lord. So somehow, if I look at us and you're not joyful, then somehow you're still not keeping the Sabbath. Even though you're keeping the Sabbath. And the point that I want to bring out is the most incredible thing is that it's asking you to do certain things. And what he's asking you to do is to holy it. And linked to the word holy is sanctification. I'm going to explain that. And it is to bless. And then, of course, by holy and bless, you find rest. But you can't find rest unless you have holy and bless. And I want to explain this. What does it mean to bless, first of all? Now, I know many times when a person sneezes, you'll say, bless you. What's it mean? What's it mean to bless me? Now, pardon? To show favor. In some way, that's correct. But if you look at the original language for the word bless, listen to this. It means to add life to. Listen to what I'm saying to you because we're finishing off. It means to add life to. How many of you, in what you do on the Sabbath, add value to it? You know, Ellen White counsels we ought to have a special eating day. You need to make what you're doing for others, but adding life to them. You see, it's not about how much life you're getting. It's what are you doing with your life for others? Are you lifting that person up into God's presence? Are you carrying a burden? Do you go to their home on a Sabbath and you notice that they haven't been able to prepare a meal, but you take a meal? Or maybe you notice it's cold and they don't have a jersey or a blanket. You see, the value of the Sabbath, which God is trying to tell us, is that the Sabbath is to tell you to think about others more than you think about yourself. To actually add value to others before you worry about adding value. It's actually taking your coat off when they ask you to and giving them your honor. It's actually walking the second mile with them. It's actually doing things to add value to people. Do you understand? Where it's not about you. Now, the most amazing thing, when you actually do help others, that's when it becomes joyful. That's when it becomes rewarding. You see and you know the crazy part about it all is that God actually calls us to do this on a seventh day because we don't do it in the other 6. And yet we are counseled that what we do on the 7th should be done in the other 6. But it's almost like God is trying to rip us out of this world for one moment in the cycle. See, the cycle of this world is all about me, I. And then all of a sudden God on the 7th day says, no, it's not about you, it's about others. And that's what it means to bless others. So when I all of a sudden bless by giving you more value than I have, that moment you've kept the Sabbath. But then it says the word sanctification means to grow in that. You know, you don't just do it once, you carry on. You know, the most amazing thing about people who are going to end up in heaven is that they are going to be really holy, blessed people. They are going to be blessed fully. And then the last thing I want you to say, the thing is, that's to bless the Sabbath day. To keep it holy is quite simple. You know, there is another day in my life, and I need to introduce another day, my wife's life, that is just as important as the Sabbath. It's my birthday. You see, on my birthday, why is it so valuable? Because it's a reminder that I was born. Now, if any of you forget my birthday, you have not kept it holy. Do you know what it means to keep it holy? Again, the Hebrew for the word holy means to remember it, to set it aside, to put it in your diary. Don't forget. You see, the beauty about keeping something holy is recognizing that it's got a particular value. Now, we are counseled by Paul's writings that God had certain things that he made for the purpose of mundane and normal things, but then he also had things that were created specifically for holy purpose. Do you understand? The Sabbath is one of those things that you set aside in your diary because you see its value. And if people come and say, no, but come and do this. No, I've already got an appointment. My appointment is already with the King of the universe. My appointment is not only with the King of the universe, who is the Creator God, who is so powerful, he can do as he pleases, but he's also my Savior. I don't want to miss my appointment with my Savior. You see, so to make something holy means to recognize the value of that. It's like if some of you, without knowing it, might have made certain things in your house holy. You know, you can't play with that. Don't touch that. You made it holy. And I want you to recognize that you need to make the Sabbath holy, which means it needs to be a special day to you, that not only do you not want to forget, but you don't want others to forget either.